Right, we're winding down and getting to the final cogwheel. It's been a kind of a long journey through all 6 of the cogwheels, and we're really looking forward to this one because of all the cogwheels, the cogwheel on sleep and mental rest is probably the one that isn't studied often enough, and some people think, well, there's nothing I can do about sleep, and does sleep affect you? And Michael,
Oh, sorry.
if his attention was focused on something that he is excited about, he's not going to lose track of time and start falling asleep like that.
Did I fall asleep?
You may as well have. But what we want to do is we want to really end with the one thing you can probably do every single day is get a better night's sleep or be mindful of the good sleep you got. Now, sleep was a mystery, and Michael, we've read paper after paper of we finally know why we sleep. Well, when we see that year after year, we finally know. We really don't know, do we?
No, I think we know a lot more than we did 5 years ago. There has been but with any of this science, we're skeptical of anybody who says they've figured it out because you're always learning more and something is coming in. But we are getting, neuroscientists and sleep scientists at least say now we have a pretty good idea of what sleep is for, because previous to that it was a mystery.
It was a lot of guesswork, and because there wasn't a way to really test, and now in the last 2 decades especially, there's a whole body of science and there's specialists, and every city now has wonderful sleep labs with teams of scientists who really can find out why people are having difficulties. And the general phrase sleep disorder is expanded to include all sorts of things that you might not have considered sleep disorder. But we're going to talk in a few minutes about some of the simple things that people can do. But if there's a serious sleep disorder, it's an essential cogwheel, and that's the one that you might want to focus on first, especially if you're younger and have chronic sleep deprivation, because you just never can quite catch up.
Well, also, younger people particularly seem to feel like they can do an all-nighter and go all night without sleep, and cram in, particularly if you're studying or something, and that's increasingly clear that's not a good idea. You're not learning as well, number one, and you're really injuring your health, number two, and your brain.
Exactly. And part of the reason we can say that with confidence is there have been a lot of studies of students who compare one group that gets decent sleep or good sleep and the other group that is the typical college student or high school student, and there's no comparison with the quality of the learning on the input and the capturing of knowledge on what they learn on all measurable factors. Sleep becomes critical to someone's learning process, and also the structure, the architecture of the brain is changed as young people grow because they are sleep deprived. Yeah,
the scientists are really now learning the structure of sleep as well. There's a fairly standard structure that we go through in a 7 to 8 hour sleep cycle that you gradually go into these stages of deeper sleep, and you get into deep sleep, and then as you're coming out, you get into rapid eye movement. People have heard that, REM sleep.
REM.
And then you go through another cycle. One of the things that I find about my sleep is I wake up periodically at night, and I kind of look around, and then I go back to sleep, and I was thinking, that's not a good thing. I shouldn't be waking up. I'm not so sure anymore. It may be that I'm just coming out of my cycle, and then I'm going to, going back into, as long as I can go back to sleep. It's when people wake up and then they can't go back to sleep.
Well, one of the things that was discovered about a decade and a half ago was that there's a part of our brains that's the size of the tip of your little finger, Michael, like an eraser.
Right, I always forget what it's called.
It's called the circadian center. So the circadian, the part of your brain called the circadian rhythm cycle, right behind the eyes and the forehead. That tiny part is like your alarm clock. It tells your brain about every 24 hours, time to go to sleep. But that part of the brain that's sensitive to certain stimulation is now known to be highly sensitive, especially to light. And light has a different factor than other stimulations of noise, touch, etc. So if someone gets light through their cameras, through their eyes, in the middle of the night, this little part of the brain that around 10, 11, 12 tells you, Michael, time to go to sleep. A shift in your chemicals in your brain with melatonin and other chemicals that tells you it's time to go to sleep. When the light hits, your brain is fooled into telling you time to get up. So when you get up to use the restroom and turn on the lights, when you go back to bed, if the lights are on, your brain is fooled into thinking it's time to get up.
So it messes up your cycle.
It does. It messes up your ability to go back to sleep.
Into that cycle, yeah.
So what do? You think smart, and you use the research that if light tells me to wake up, I'm not going to turn on the light. And I always like to say, unless your toilet is on wheels, you know where it's going to be, buy yourself some night lights, and it might let you get back to sleep. And even if you can't get night lights, at least squint. You can cut down 80 to 90% of the light, and you're allowing your brain to then get back to sleep without thinking, without moving forward. So part of what we try to do is to find out these little tips on how to get back to sleep. One of them is to understand the science has shown that if you drop the light down in the room every hour or so, turn off a light or two through the evening. It's like an airplane that's cruising down. You don't exercise in the evening to get blood pumping. Again, that causes you not to be able to go to sleep as well. So we're trying to get a toolbox full of sleep aids that are really the front line before you move to pills, which some people, doctor's orders of course, but some people who go to a pill as a first response, they miss the fact that it might be something else.
Yeah, good advice. Let's take a step back and talk about what science is finding, why sleep is important in the first place. The deep sleep and the REM sleep, apparently, I've been continuing to learn more of that, have different functions, and they're really beginning to pin down this. The REM sleep is the sleep that where it's rapid eye movement. You can, if you're watching somebody sleeping in this phase, you can actually see their eyes moving, and it's almost as like they are awake, except they're not awake, and the body is paralyzed. But what they think is happening is that the brain is processing all of the information
from the prior day.
Yeah, that's been taken in during that day, and it's almost like the eyes are tracking these visual images and reliving. And it seems that the brain is sorting through the information, deciding what was valuable, what has an emotional tie, what has the intellectual connections that needs to be kept
during that cycle. Now, you remember I said earlier that the circadian cycle is a 24-hour cycle. There is a cycle that's a 90-minute cycle called an ultracadian cycle. And when you showed earlier that sometimes you wake up, well, you went this way, which is the way the charts over an 8-hour sleep. But an ultracadian, I like to use a circle. Ultracadian cycle is when you fall asleep about 45 minutes after you fall asleep, sometimes 55, sometimes. But at the bottom of the 90-minute cycle, you're in your deep, you're in your rapid eye movement REM sleep. That's when the brain consolidates and what you just explained. Then it comes out of that cycle and goes into a light sleep cycle, and that's the time that you'll wake up to use the restroom, or the time that you will hear the dog barking. It's been barking the whole time, Michael, but only when you are not in that deep sleep where you're almost paralyzed are you aware of that. So when you wake up and use the restroom and get back to sleep, you'll have that next cycle. You don't necessarily have a deep sleep cycle that you're dreaming a lot during that, but that's when the dreams would happen. So when researchers would wake you up at the bottom of that cycle, repeatedly wake you up, you would sleep with intervals, but if they wake you up in the dream sleep, pretty soon the next few days you're really coming apart at the seams. Cognitively, you have to have those deep cycles in order to, what you just said, consolidate the day before, the week before. And in another segment you talked about the creative cycle. Part of what sleep allows you to do is to put the pieces of the puzzle together, because you're not forcing anything, you're letting them kind of float together.
So REM sleep is when you're consolidating memories, you're sort of making all those process, you're dreaming. The deep sleep, I'm learning, is when your body is renewing itself and repairing itself and flushing out the waste materials. That's a very important part. the metabolism that you were talking about that takes place when we take in oxygen, we burn everything, creates waste materials, and the brain has to flush that out, and apparently that takes place during deep sleep when kind of the brain relaxes and allows liquid to come in
And I remember
and
when
flush
you,
it out.
I remember when you sent me some of those recently, and we both said, these are like the garbage men who come at night, and if you don't allow them, if you don't allow that to get there during that deep part of the sleep, then what happens to the waste? It doesn't necessarily get cleaned out the next day with trying to make up for lost sleep. It's going to do some damage. It's going to stay in there, and you call it gunk. It's going to gunk things up.
Yep.
And we're going to watch that type of science because that's relatively new as well.
Yep.
Okay.
So sleep is very important.
It is, and I'm going to end with this. Sarah Medwick from Harvard wrote a book entitled Take a Nap, Change Your Life. And what she did was to go into an analysis of every study she could find on naps, kind of myth busting on whether a nap spoils the sleep. And that's a book that we can recommend, and we can go deeper into that, Michael. But she also found that it does restore people's ability to function better later in the day.
Mm.
And in our field of gerontology, one of the takeaways that we got from her book was that if someone takes a nap and reluctantly holds their hand up that they take a nap every day, once they understand that the science says you get not only 2 days of life for one, but the later part of the day, your coordination is better. So we always say if you take a nap every day, you change your life for the better, and you may be saving yourself a broken hip 10 years from now, because when you're cognitively engaged and you're physically more coordinated because you took a nap, that can save people a lot of stress later on. So take a nap, change your life.
Thank you.
Okay, back to sleep.